We're starting. Well, when the fuck are we live? Are we live? All right. Yeah, we're live. Okay, good. I'm Vito D'Amcio of the Wrecking Crew comedy podcast. I'm talking to the one and only Dr. Richard Carrier, who is a prominent atheist. He's written numerous books. One of his most famous ones is, sorry, I wrote this down. Or else I'd fucking screw it up. It was the God delusion. So,
oh no,
right, on the historicity of Jesus. So, and that was 2014, and that was really big. And there was also you give a lot of lectures, talks, debates. You're really great at debates. And
yeah, people tend to like that. Yeah, I've built a skill at it. That's true. So I do have a reputation for being good at that.
Yeah. So how did you? I mean, yeah, I wrote this book here. It's called "Row, Row, Row Your Boat Gently Down the Stream." So I wrote that, and it sold like shit because somebody else wrote it too. How do you come up with so much? I mean, the body of work. We're the same age, believe it or not. I look like I'm fucking ready to hit the the ground. And my eye looks fucked up because I had a piece of fucking metal in it for 5 days. I didn't know.
Jeez.
Yeah. I thought I had pink eye, so I was all happy when I went to the hospital, thinking, yeah, they're gonna, say I have pink eye. So I'm like doing the whole, yeah, I'm in, I'm out. I hate hospitals. And a guy walks in behind me, and he's holding his hand, and his fingers cut them off on a saw. And he sits beside me, and I'm very queasy and shit. And he's like, "Do you want to see?" I go, "Fuck no." I go, "Why aren't you in there?" And he's like, "I have no idea." And I'm like, "Because I would, I would be freaking. I'd be like, fuck, get me in there, man. I want you to look at my I don't want to lose my fingers." So he sat down. I waited 5 hours, right? Because for 5 days I couldn't sleep. And when you go to the doctor, you're thinking he's going to say one thing or whatever. So he looks into it was a girl, a girl doctor. That was fucking hilarious. So anyways, she looks into my eye and she goes, "Oh no." And I go, "What's this oh no shit?" And she goes, "You have metal in your eye." And I go, "What the fuck, metal?" And then I thought about what happened, and I was like, it's behind my son on a bike, and he kicked up. I thought a bug hit me in the eye.
Oh.
It was metal. So anyways, so my eye, I look like the lead singer of Radiohead right now. So that's good. So anyways, all right. So if I ramble like that, just say shut the fuck up and talk about me. No one gives a shit about me. Okay? So I appreciate it because my voice was fucked up. This is great. My eye.
Yeah, that was another thing you were struggling with.
Yeah. So I really appreciate that because we were supposed to do this 6 years ago, and all of a sudden we became famous. So how, when you're debating, how do you, I mean, I've seen you go up against a lot of people, but one of the ones that freaked me out was you and Dan Dennett, and you were going up against a bunch of Muslims.
Oh, Dan Barker.
Dan Barker, I'm sorry.
Correct. Yes. Oh yeah, the Tawhid debate.
So incredibly rude to you.
Yeah, that was astonishing because they were super nice to us outside the context of the debate, but as soon as we hit the podium, it's all fire and brimstone and extreme rudeness, like you said. Yeah, it was quite stunning, actually. It was the starkness, and it was very unexpected, but we handled it.
Yeah, like you came off. I mean, I would have, even if I wasn't an atheist, or I consider myself an agnostic. So I I came off just thinking the other guys look so bad.
Yeah, it was interesting in that debate. That was actually in Dearborn, Michigan, a year or two after 9/11. And the Tawhid Institute wanted to put this debate on to show that Muslims can have rational debate and aren't just going to saw your head off or whatever, right?
Right.
And it was very valuable educational experience. I got to meet Muslims from all over the world, both men and women, and talk to them and stuff. So I learned a lot about that. But our strategy, Dan and I, was good cop, bad cop. He was going to be bad cop and I was going to be good cop. And I would go up there and just defend naturalism and just say, like, this is what we believe. And this is why it's true. And he would go up there and attack religion. And so we figured, like, there are different groups of people will appreciate each style. And that's exactly what happened. We had people come up to each one of us after the debate and say, I'm so glad, like, you took, like, the non-confrontational, like, positive position. Like, I didn't like the other guy who was all anti-religion. And then other people would come up to him and say, I'm so glad you, like, took the anti-religion stance, and you're like, you were very, like, really challenging religion. And the other guy was not, he wasn't doing that so much. It was like, so he actually effectively hit multiple audiences. It was,
Yeah,
that's good.
that's great. That's great, because I heard that they came up to you guys after and apologized. And for me, I would have been like, "Fuck you, you know, I want you to apologize in front of everybody, the way, it's like me being incredibly rude to you, and then just sending you a little, or not even an email. So if I sent you an email, you could show everybody that I apologize. It's like if I ever see you in person, I would say, I'm so sorry for the way.
Yeah, I think it was the organizers that apologized, not the actual speakers. So that's why that didn't happen. But yeah, no, I mean, Michael Corey, who was the second on the theist side, was kind of a nutcase. Afterwards, he was denying that certain things had been said, that he'd said certain things in the debate, and we had audio.
Yeah,
I sent him the audio, and he says, "Nope, I don't hear it." I was like, "But that's what you're saying on the audio, word for word." I had to, like, stop talking to the guy after. So yeah, it was that was an interesting debate, and it's a long one too, because it's team debate, 2-on-2. And yeah, you see lots of different stuff happen in there. My use of a prop was very effective.
Yeah. Well,
the magazine.
You should have got up and just beat the shit out of them. I mean, just like literally beat the living shit out of them. I know you're not a violent person.
Yeah, the goal is not to do that.
Yeah, you should have had me. I would have just fucking gone over there and just said, stop acting like assholes, because you're behaving. I mean, if you want me to believe in God, you're doing a bad job. Or
yeah, I think the strategy a lot of these people take, apologists for any religion, is that they're not really trying to recruit people to their religion. They're trying to keep people from leaving their religion, right? So they're trying to play to their base. They're trying to denigrate and demonize atheists so that no one will want to be one. And so that's their whole strategy, right? Is to instill fear, like you're going to be doomed if you question this religion. To instill, that sort of shame, like you don't want to be an atheist, you don't want to be one of these guys. Like even when Rajabali, one of his arguments was like, oh, atheists have much higher rates of depression and things like that, which is totally false. But that was one of his arguments. So he's like, that's a scare tactic, right? It's like, oh, don't leave God, you'll become despondent and you'll lose meaning in life and you'll become depressed and commit suicide. It's that kind of, it's all directed towards people who are already believers, that they are fearful will leave the faith if they hear the truth. And so once you understand that's your strategy, then you know going in how to behave and how to interact and what kinds of points you need to make.
Right. Yeah. No, it looked very they just looked really bad, and they got the crowd to laugh, and I thought, what are you laughing about? And
yeah, it was that audience was about 1,000 strong and almost all Muslim.
Yeah,
so that was one of the most unique debates I've ever had.
Like you should have just whipped out your cock and go suck this and just drop the mic.
Not my style.
That's why you should have told me to do it. I would have just they would have probably chopped it off. But, you know, it would have been for, you know, the greater cause, you know. I mean, I don't
Well,
know how you maintain, that was great, but at the end of it, you know, the beauty is if you, because you know, I used to think Christopher Hitchens was the devil, and same with R and Raw, and until I started watching their debates, and I used to go, and even with yours, when you have a great it's a great talk you give. I don't know if it was for Tam or Tim or Terry, whatever the fuck whatever they call it.
It's probably Skepticon, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Some of my best talks come out of there.
And it was about if aliens were to, you know, see it, you know, like humans, and, you know, why, like, are Christians crazy? Like, are they delusional or something?
Yeah, that was it. Yes. Are Christians delusional? That was a Skepticon talk many years ago, and a good one. I have a follow-up article where I think I went a little too far on the whole pushing the insanity angle. But I have a good blog about it that'll educate people on that side. But yeah, other than that, that was a pretty good organized video. And it was a video talking about the contents of the Christian delusion, which was an anthology that I have 2 chapters in. A lot of other authors have really great chapters in that one, edited by John Loftus, that had just come out. These are really good books. The whole series that John Loftus did, Christian Delusion, The End of Christianity, Christianity is Not Great. He's got a few more. They're good for Christians who think that, excuse me.
Bless you.
Yeah, may the dogs bless me. No, it's a good book for Christians who think like, or who are told that the God delusion and all of those, you know, the four always happens in twos.
I bet you there's a Muslim watching going.
Well, no, I don't think so. But no, people who are told that those books are too naive or don't go deeper into the nuances of religion, and these books do. Like, they really get into the science of religion and stuff like that, and the actual detailed facts. And so they're good reads for people who haven't been exposed to this stuff before. And it's a good example of what I think our strategy is, or should be, in debates, which is to get ideas out that these people won't have heard. And of course, the opposition will get up there and try and denigrate you and try to use fallacies and deny it and all this stuff. But once they've heard these things they've never heard before, a certain percentage of them is going to go, wait a minute. And then they're going to go research it, and they're going to find out it's true. And they're not going to be inoculated by the attempts to get them, to prevent them from doing that.
Right.
And those are the people who get out. And that's how we get a net increase in our numbers over time, is we just get a small percentage of them every year by exposing them to ideas. That's all we have to do, is just expose them to ideas that they're being shielded and sheltered from.
Yeah, I went, like, there was a atheist site. I'm not going to say the atheist site, but I just asked a question. I'm going to be interviewing Dr. Carrier, and are there more atheists now than before? And maybe I worded it wrong or whatever. And I had, you know, one cocksucker after another cocksucker reply to me going, you know, are you an idiot? Are you, you know, the numbers are going higher and higher. And I'm just like, I just wanted to know. Like,
right. Yeah.
You know, I didn't want to get yelled at, you moron. I just want, you know, are there more atheists now than ever before? Because before, if you said you were an atheist, I remember I told a guy I was, you know, an atheist, an agnostic, and he looked at me like I was an alien. He just said, "What are you talking about? What is that?" And I said, "You know, I don't think there's a God." And he went completely, you know, not crazy, but he looked at me like I was the devil. And
right.
I just, no. I go, you ever have a chance? Listen to Christopher Hitchens. And he's like, I'm not going to listen to that fucking asshole. And I was just like, no, just listen to what he has to say. Because this is what was going on. Once you gave your talk, and Aaron Ra, who I always fuck up his name, and call him Aaron. You know, he loved that. I did an interview with him.
No, don't do that. Yeah.
I called him Aaron Ra, but the problem was he forgot his sound. I had like so many people. He forgot to turn his sound on. He said it was a new microphone, and I was trying to get, and there was a thunderstorm going on, so that power kept going on and off. No joke.
Yeah, yeah, that could happen here actually.
Yeah, and I kept trying to talk, but I couldn't hear him. So people were like, "You should give him a chance to speak," and I was like, I couldn't hear the fucking guy, you know. So and I was getting like, I was like, Aaron, and he's like, no, you know, I was like, Aaron, you know, and he's like, no, it's Aaron, you know. I was like, oh fuck, the last guy I want to piss off. So he was super sweet, very kind, and before I used to think he was the devil, and same thing with Hitchens. I would just, but here's the thing: when I watched your talks and their talks, I would always go back because there was something you said that bothered me, you know, and I would just go back to the talk. And I remember getting up at like 2 in the morning, just going, what did he say? And I go back to the debate and I'm listening and I'm like, yeah, that he keeps reading scripture. And it's like, stop reading scripture. There's, you know, to me, once I said the scripture was, you know, what was it? 30, sometimes it was between 30 to 80 years later, somebody wrote about the Jesus, saying that, you know, and it was a bunch of Greeks that wrote it, and nobody, there was like, it was like another, like, it wasn't like firsthand, you know.
Yeah, right.
So this is what I said. It was always, it's anonymous, and that always bothered me. You know, if it's the word of God, this is what gets to me. If it's the word of God, he should write a book that even somebody like me should just read it. And you know, I'm dyslexic. You know, I should read it and understand it and say, yes, this is, like, there's no confusion. There's no, and there should be, you know, you should look up at the sky and say, I'm here. And, you know, again, people, you know, like, you look at the world and you think, holy shit, you have mega rich people and you got people in Bangladesh going through sewers looking for money. And I'm like, this is a fucked up planet. I mean, if God made this, he made the worst creature in the universe. I mean, if aliens were to land, honestly, I believe this. They would say, these are the worst. We thought the Vorlons were bad. These guys are fucking animals. You know, they're terrible. They're literally turning this planet to shit. And I love it when people go, well, they're you know, I know aliens are like, they're watching over us. And I'm like, do you think they give a fuck about, they came all the way from the nebula, from another galaxy to watch over us and shove shit up our ass, and you know, to let us know that, you know, they go back to wherever the fuck they came from and go, yeah, 1 out of 10 doesn't mind a good anal probe.
Yeah, that's kids in the hall, right? They have a skit on that.
Exactly. Kids in the hall. That's awesome. So, so it should. That's the thing that got to me was.
Yeah, that's the goal, right? Is to have things that you won't have heard and won't have been told that will check out when you go check into them. Now, a certain percentage of people, of course, will run away from it, right? They'll just not want to deal with it. Want to deny that they heard it or whatever, or come up with excuses not to research it. But there's always going to be a percentage of people who will be bothered by this, will be bugged by it, and will just keep, you know, picking at that thread. And then that's what leads them out, ultimately. It gets them out of the labyrinth, as it were. Yeah.
And it's just, to me, it was incredibly depressed, because I just thought, that's it. When you're gone, you're gone. So that's what I was having trouble with. And
Right.
I guess that's when I just said, well, maybe I'm an agnostic because I don't know. I don't know. Um, but it always bothers me that um, how many billions of people have died over our time, and if you are God, I just think all these billions of people, that's just way too many. It's just fucking, we're not talking a million or whatever, and heaven sounds like shit, like it just doesn't sound. I mean, the whole thing about heaven, the clouds or whatever, and it,
Who knows? Yeah.
like,
There's a lot of conflicting fantasies about what heaven will be like.
yeah, like my grandmother passed away. Do you think my grandmother, if I were to see her, if she passed away, is she going to be the way I remember her? Because I know if I die, I want people to see me when I was 19 and good looking,
Right.
right? I don't want, well, Vito, that's, you look like shit. You're fucking 80 years old and it hurts to pee, and I want to look like I did when I was at my best. I think everybody wants that. So I think you would meet, like, if there is a heaven, you would meet a great uncle or whatever, and he would be like, some 16-year-old kid riding his bike at the happiest time of his life.
Yeah, right.
So it's just, that's the very confusing part, and there is no mention of that. Like, no one has ever come back from
Yeah.
to say, hey, I went to heaven, and it's always these near death.
Right. Yeah, the false stories, or one of them was even admitted that they made it up. Others are, I mean, they're very divergent. If you look at near-death experiences in other cultures, you see that they experience completely different things based on their cultural experience. And then the things that are in common, we know have biological explanations, like the tunnel of light aspect. When people have that experience, we have an actual neurological explanation for why people have that experience. That doesn't have anything to do with a real tunnel, right? So there's some good books on this that have been written for people who are interested in that. But yeah, the believers, though, will really push this. Is no, we do have evidence that's actually shown, but it's really terrible evidence. That's the thing.
Yeah, but the evidence is like, I want more than that. I want, like one guy said, I was scared. It was, it was like I was such a bad person in life, and I'm like, of course you're gonna have this fucking horrible. It's like your subconscious is telling you that you've done bad. So when your brain is shutting down, my theory is that you're having all these. It's a computer shutting down, essentially.
Yeah, you're getting random firing, right? So like it's similar to dreaming. Like whatever's going on in your head, whatever you've been ruminating on is gonna echo around, bounce around, and your brain is going to try and make sense of it. So it's going to create a coherent narrative out of this randomness. A lot of people, of course, want to think the best of themselves and want to think of the best of their futures and stuff. So that's why they have pleasant experiences, or they will meet, the common story is they'll meet deceased relatives, but oftentimes people will meet living relatives in heaven, which is an interesting question. It's like, how can they be alive on earth and in heaven? But anyway, but it just shows that people their brains are constructing this experience, and it is built out of random firing combined with the brain's attempt to create coherence out of it. And the coherence and some of the randomness can be driven by the things that have been sticking in your mind, or the place that your mind wants to go, essentially.
Yeah, I saw a talk where it was John Cleese, and he gave a talk about where he had these doctors go up and talk about, their patients having near-death experiences. And I just thought, like one example was the doctor, the patient heard what was going on in the room. And I just thought, the guy's sleeping. He's not, his heart stopped, but he's still getting some information, So I don't, whatever. I think I need better evidence than just you telling me. I mean,
Oh yeah, so that's yeah, that kind of thing. So those kinds of stories, you got to be careful because of timing. Um, Oftentimes it's assumed or claimed that they heard things going on when they had a flat EEG or something, for example. But actually, the timing doesn't work out that way. When you look at the actual timing of these experiences, the person heard things actually when they had a completely active brain. So, so the timing doesn't work out the way the near-death experience advocates want it to work out. And you can find all of this stuff. There's a really good critique. The best book on this for people who want to research it is, I think it's called The Myth of the Afterlife. Got it here somewhere. Keith Augustine is one of the lead writers on it. Where do I have that? I don't know where it is right now, but it's an extensive volume that deals with all of the claims and basically analyzes them skeptically and shows how the evidence actually breaks down and stuff. Brings in the science that we actually know about everything.
right.
It is the ultimate reference book for combating the kind of myths that evolve out of these experiences.
Yeah, I would just want one or several people to, clinically say, they were gone, they were dead for 2 weeks, like dead, and,
Right.
and then come back and say, well, this is heaven, this is this is, whatever, and then that would help out. But there hasn't been, there's billions of people that have passed, and you have a few people saying, I had this wonderful experience, or I had a really bad experience. And to me, that it's like me telling you I have a Ferrari in my garage, and you're like, okay, I would believe it if you show me the pink slip and the Ferrari. You know what I mean? Like I would, and take me for a cruise in it.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's true. Yeah, it's afterlife is this promise that's made based on no evidence, right? You can't see it, you can't go there, you can't meet anyone who's been there. Like if it was anything else, if it wasn't this promise of immortality, if it was like a fairyland that people said existed, but you couldn't go there, no one comes back from there, you can't see it, you can't get evidence from it or anything like that, you wouldn't believe it. And so I think, yeah, this is the challenge between desire-driven belief and evidence-based belief. Evidence-based belief would lead you to say, like, no, actually, for all the evidence we have, and there's more evidence than just this, the absence of evidence, there's actually positive evidence that you need a working brain to have consciousness. When you don't have a working brain, you're just not conscious anymore. And you need a physical brain to store the information that constitutes you. So when that storage material is gone, then so is the information. Like you're just gone. It's just the end. That's where the evidence leads. But that's a very uncomfortable thing that people have to then deal with. They have to cope with that and figure out, how am I going to adjust the way I see life and the way I live life and how I align my values and what I do with my life, knowing that this is all I get. That which of course leads to people becoming more philosophically aware, more mature, more emotionally stable and capable of handling their life and making good decisions about how to live their life. So it's a thing that people should go through. But this religious promise that satisfies their desire, like, oh, no, you're not going to die, you're going to live forever. If you can just satisfy yourself with that, you don't have to challenge yourself with figuring out all these other things. And you can sort of live in that kind of childish state. And I think that is a strong pull for a lot of people in religion. There are other similar desire-based pulls, not just that one. There's people want to meet, they don't want to accept that their loved ones who have died, they'll never get to meet again, that they're gone. So people don't want that. People fear that society will fall apart if there's no religion. So they have this desire, this need to believe that God exists. It's the only way that we can ensure that there's going to be uniform justice. Otherwise, there's only fallible justice. And how awful is that? And it's like, well, yeah, it is awful, but it's the best we've got. So the reality is more difficult to cope with. But that's reality is what the evidence-based reasoning leads us to. Desire-based reasoning leads us away from reality towards these fantasies that people glorify and honor as religions, and then get extremely angry when you challenge them.
Yeah, they really get they really do get angry, and to me, it's kind of what freaks me out is people. And again, I always seem to get into arguments. I don't know why. I don't. Psychics and stuff. I sent to you a link to years ago a show I did. It was a ghost show, and it was a spoof on a ghost show.
Right.
And you were like, "Oh, this is funny. This is you know what ghost shows really." You know, you're like, you know, it was just a 2-minute trailer. I sent
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the most I could watch of a ghost show. Because all it is really, you know, and I've talked to people about this, and people, the people I despise the most are psychics or mediums.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think they are getting people at their most vulnerable, and they're telling you stuff that, um, you know, you're going to see this person again. Oh, it's, you know, you know, if they lost a child, he's standing right behind you right now, and he's telling you that he loves you. And, you know, the person is an emotional wreck, and you're just fucking with that person, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's all, I mean, if I had that gift, uh, I wouldn't charge you for it. If it was something that, it was something so beautiful that, and I understand people got to make a living, but, you know, I would have a
Well,
little,
just think of all the crimes you could solve if you could talk to the dead, right?
well,
Like,
that's,
so where would we find evidence of this? Where would, you know, like, there's so many people who've been killed to silence them. You can go get that information now, right? So there's so much stuff that you could do if that you could actually talk to the dead.
yeah.
That would be of benefit to all of society.
Well,
You know,
it actually makes it worse because, I've talked to several people that have, I can't believe I forgot his name. Um, anyway, he wrote several books, and one of the things he wrote about was, um, Brad Radford. Anyways, that's his last name, Radford.
yes, I know who you mean. Yeah.
So I've talked to him a few times about it, and he's a really nice guy. He should lose a little bit of weight, but nice guy. And he told me this horrible story of how the police went to a psychic, and, you know,
Right.
instead of looking where, you know, in the trunk of the car that was, you know, 20 feet away, the kid suffocated while, you know, the cops are running around all over the place. Meanwhile, the kids were still on the property. If they just opened the trunk of the car, they would have found these kids. Instead, they listened to this psychic that told them, "Oh, they're down by a river. You know, I
Yeah.
see,
Right.
you know, I see water," and it's like, you fucking piece of shit.
Yeah.
Like,
That's the reality of what happens. Is they'll claim they solve crimes, but really they're not. They're retrofitting, if at best. But no, they've never really, like, gotten secret information out of a dead person.
yeah.
You know, so that's just more evidence of that
Yeah.
being a lie. But people are so keen to believe it.
Yeah, it's hilarious. It's like, what are the lotto numbers? And they're like, it doesn't work that way. And I go, well, how the fuck does it work? You know, because it is, it's like, what you're telling me is horseshit. I mean, you know, where is the, you know, what, you know, people want answers, and you're giving these simple, generic bullshit answers that anybody, and I think anybody that has the power, nowhere in the Bible does it say, I give people the power to talk to the dead. There, you know, there's no.
Yeah, there's one scene in the Old Testament where a spirit is summoned. A spirit of the dead is summoned. So there actually is a medium in there, and it isn't actually stated as something in line with God's law or anything like that, or nor is it condemned. Actually, it just happens as part of the story. The Witch of Endor, I think, is the tale.
It's called the Witch of Endor.
Yeah, the Witch of Endor. I think if you go, if you just Google that, you'll probably find the story. It's the one instance of mediumship depicted in the Bible. Otherwise, the Bible says that you got to kill these people. Mediums should be executed, as all witches should be. They say. Which of course led to all kinds of horrible atrocities.
The Salem witch hunts, and
yeah.
You had a neighbor say, yeah, the guy next door is a witch, And they would just, yeah, I know. It's always, we live in a fucked up planet, don't we?
Yeah. Yeah. Some pretty horrible, fucked up shit has happened.
That is what scares me the most, where I sit there and I go, it's 2018 and we live in such a, I talked to a guy, that is a Christian, because I said I wanted to ask him some questions. We went out for coffee a couple days ago, and I asked him about what should I ask, Richard Carrier, and he's like, well, ask him, for evil. Okay, that's one of them. But why does he enjoy people sin? Because they like their evil. They like being evil.
Okay. What? You got to explain more. Yeah.
He said, he goes, people sin because they like.
Oh, I see. Yeah, yeah.
They like their sin.
Right. Everybody just wants to sin. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I go, okay. And like, what? And like, do you think that is the case, that people, and like, do you think that people are inherently bad? Here's an example. I was brought up Catholic. To get out of your sins, you just needed to do confession. So I could do bad, right? My thoughts were, I can do bad, and all I needed to do was really tell a priest and he would forgive me, and everything's okay. And I heard the Jewish religion, they have a thing where at the end of the year, they ask God to forgive them. And so anything bad that they did gets erased. So, and I could be wrong, but
it's the Yom Kippur. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's it. So that is a cop-out. I mean, if you're bad to somebody, you should own up to it. If you did bad, find them and write them. Do the right thing. You don't need a third party, invisible man to tell you, to say this is the right thing. I mean, you should know that you did bad.
Yeah, I mean, really, first of all, they're playing fast and loose with what they mean by sin and bad, right? Like they're actually talking about usually sexual pleasure, things like that, things that actually don't do harm, that actually aren't sins, but they want to call them sins for a variety of psychological and historical reasons. And yeah, of course, if you define, you create a moral system that forbids ordinary, healthy, pleasurable activity, then yes, it's true that people are going to, quote unquote, want to sin because they want to get out of this stupid repressive system you've created that's actually contrary to human happiness. They want to go live a life of human happiness. But then there's the narrow segment of things that actually are bad, which is, how you treat people, if it's in a negative way, honesty, things like these. There are actual good and bad things that are true independently of religion. And you can make this point because in order for you to be happy in your life, in order to be to have good social relations with your neighbors and community and so on, there are certain behaviors you have to engage in. And there's complex ways that these interact. If your society and neighbors are oppressive and mean, then you might have to react differently and behave differently. So you have to look at the whole organization of what makes the most sense for everyone. Basically, it's this kind of, if you look at the Rawlsian concept, is like, if we come up with a set of rules for how we behave and we don't get to choose who we're going to be in that society, what set of rules would we set up? What would we say would be the right way for people to behave? And you can think of these things rationally through evidence. You don't even need to appeal to a religion. You don't need to appeal to afterlife. You don't need to appeal to gods. You can reason it out. And I've written a lot on this. You can go to my blog and look at moral theory or meta-ethics are two categories in my drop-down menu. And you can go look at the things that I've written on this, is that we don't need religions for this stuff. And the reality is that you do need to want to be a good person. And you really don't need this idea that people will leave religion specifically so that they can do wrong is usually the other way around. Most people who leave religion do it because of moral objections to their religion, that they actually want to be a good person and want to live a happy life, and see religion as basically getting in the way of that, of getting in the way of both things. And the reality is that most people do want to be good people. They might be confused about what that means, though. Like, what is it? What constitutes being a good person? Or they might be immature or lazy about it, and not think things through thoroughly. But really, the only people who are committed to, like, they want to do actual evil things, or they don't care if they do, are sociopaths, which we know is a mental illness. So, and so we can actually categorize that and deal with it. We understand it medically. We can't cure it, but that is a thing we have to deal with, is these small number of people who are sociopaths in society. How do we deal with them? But apart from that, everyone else really does just, they want to be right with themselves. And it's the basic idea is, if we become the kinds of things we hate, if we become the people we hate, we're going to start hating ourselves on some level. Whereas if we become the kind of person we like in the world, the kind of person that we like to interact with in the world, then we're going to actually start to build self-respect, like healthy self-esteem. And I think that's the psychological core basis, that combined with reciprocity, how you interact with society and how society is going to respond to you. When you take those two things into account, you can build a whole moral system in terms of how you should behave. And it often does not look like what the religious person is pushing. It doesn't have these moral restrictions on sexuality, for example. It doesn't have these other kinds of moral rules that don't really make any human sense and actually do restrict human happiness. So there is a kernel of truth in this. You all just want a sin thing, but it's only because they define sin wrong. They've defined things that are healthy and good as sin. And that is actually what's wrong with their religion.
Right. Right. That was good. All right. That explained too much for me. You went too far. You should have just said, I don't. And here's something I wanted to ask you, and I asked permission because I don't. Yeah. I didn't want. I don't like. When I do these, they're supposed to be fun and loose, and
sure.
I want to be, a friend, not confrontational or I gotcha moment.
Yeah, right.
I hate those. So they kind of. You ever get embarrassed when you watch stuff?
Yeah, sometimes. You mean when you watch other people?
Like you see if you see just say a debate and the person makes a complete fool out of themselves, you kind of feel embarrassed.
Oh yeah. Cringeworthy. Yeah.
There was a comedian that she just got her show canceled, and she's talking about how abortion is great and you should celebrate it, and it just I believe a woman can do whatever she wants with her money, with her body, but just the way it was just embarrassing, and I could see why it just made me uncomfortable. She could give two shits because she was like, hey, I want to push the envelope. And I think that there was so much backlash to that they just that's what I mean by sometimes you watch stuff, you could get kind of embarrassed, or you just feel embarrassed for the person. So I don't like that. So anyways, so I read where you were married for 17 years, right? And you wanted to have had an extramarital, and then you just said to your wife you wanted a divorce, and
I was actually married for 20 years, and was faithful for 17, and then had a few one night stands, and started to realize, it took me a while to realize that actually I probably shouldn't be doing monogamy, particularly given certain aspects of my marriage, which I keep private. But there were additional reasons to this, and so eventually, I did confess to my wife, like, look, I've had some affairs, and I just don't.
Was it with Delahunty?
What? No. What?
No, I'm just curious because I just thought, fuck, I would never. You know what I mean? Not him.
Oh. No, no, I have no idea what you're talking about there. But no, and as I just said, like I understand if you want to get a divorce, because I can't do monogamy in this relationship. And she said, well, let's try an open marriage for a while and see if that works. And so we did. We did that for 2 years, and it just wasn't for her. That wasn't the thing for her. But it was. So basically, that's when we decided to get a divorce, and we had an amicable divorce. We only needed a divorce facilitator. We didn't even need lawyers because we all agreed on everything, and so we were fine about that. But and then, you know, once we were divorced, this was the beginning of 2015. Then I could publicly declare openly that, you know, I'm non-monogamous. I'm ethically non-monogamous, polyamorous. I'm not going back. And so then I could be much more open and honest and not have to ever be in that situation again.
Right. Because I was reading a few posts, and what I meant by Matt Delonte, did you cheat with him? But anyways, it was just a.
I know that's what you meant. I just don't know where that came from. That's just out of left field. But anyway.
So, yeah, what I read was that, you know, now that you became famous, you've kicked your wife to the curb. You know, and then this is what, you know, what it said. And I was like, I don't know if that happens with fame, where people just, I mean, if you did not, we're the same age, believe it or not. And I'm married, and I just, my wife supports, you know, she brings in the bulk of the money. So I would feel, you know, like when I, you know, do stand up, fuck Canadian stand up, you get paid in fucking quarters over here. It's like you don't, you know, so she was, you know, and she worked a shit job, and so, and I've been proposed, you know, where I could have easily cheated, and and I'm a horny person, so I just couldn't, you know, because I felt like, you know, on my wife, I have kids with her, I love, I still love my wife. You know, I could easily. I remember the girl said, you know, her wife doesn't even have to know, and she was, you know, very good looking. But I said I would know, you know, that would fuck me up. So
yeah, that's how I was for 17 years, and the pressure just became too much, really. And a lot of that became exposure to ideas, and then there were other difficulties in my marriage as well. So it's all of these sort of converging events led to a change in that. And what I, you know, in hindsight, like if I knew then what I know now, of course I was naive then, but if I knew more about the acceptability of just admitting that you want to be non-monogamous, I would have done that first, right, rather than cheated. But I just didn't understand that about myself, and I wasn't fully in a place of understanding that that was an option at the time. So it would have been better, and this is what I recommend to people who are in the same place as me, is if you want to do that, if you are unhappy because of your forced monogamy, the situation you're in, you should be honest. Or if you think you're going to cheat, for example, you should just be honest and say, look, I just can't do monogamy anymore. And what does that mean for us? Does that mean we break up? Does that mean we have an open relationship? And just explore that honestly with your partner. I think that's the best way to go. But it's never easy, because, you know, you could think like that's going to nuke your marriage and that's going to transform your life. And so it's difficult. There's no simple, easy solution in those circumstances. There's going to be some amount of unhappiness no matter which decision you make. And it's just a question of which unhappiness lasts longer or is worse than all of the options. And that depends on individual cases.
Right. So do you think, like, when people say, well, there was an article that I read that she supported you, and now that you've become famous, you kicked her to the curb, you know. And to me,
it's not possible to kick someone to the curb who's actually more successful than you. So yeah.
Oh, I didn't know. I'm just what the article said, and
yeah, I know. Yeah, no, there's haters say all this stuff. No, we had an amicable divorce. We had an equitable division of assets and everything. So, no, a relationship is a relationship. You know, in terms of how you structure it, if you're going to dissolve a relationship, as long as you're doing it equitably, I don't see why anyone should see that as one person kicking the other to the curb. It's just a mutual decision. Like, look, we're not compatible anymore. We need to go our separate ways. And anyone who says otherwise is basically arguing against the existence of divorce entirely, or the existence of any breakup. So I think any attempt to sort of demonize people who get divorced or who break up this gets back to that religious mindset of turning into a sin a thing that is not a sin. It's actually good for human happiness. We need the ability for people to leave relationships that aren't working for them. And accept that that's going to be a mutual decision in one way or another.
Right. All right. So, all right. Just curious. I had to ask you that, and you know, I think I'm more uncomfortable than you are. So
that's quite possible.
I just ask people stuff that they just, you know, but I just thought, you know, I've never seen that. I didn't know that about you.
Oh, I see. Right. Yeah. It's a well-known fact of me now that I'm an outspoken polyamorous man, and have been for 3 years now.
So when you do the debates or talks, do you ever look at the crowd and do what Van Halen did in their heyday and talk to somebody and say, I like the chick, row 7, talk to...
No.
No. I would, you know.
I don't... that's not interesting. I don't find that if I'm going to pursue someone, it's got to be more with interaction. Like, I got to know something about them, right, and feel a chemistry with them. I can't just pick someone visually and say, yeah, that person. That doesn't really work.
Right. Yeah. Well, I guess that's where we differ. So.
Well, granted, I have a lot more experience with a non-monogamous lifestyle. So I know the difference between good sex and bad sex with lots of different people, mostly good sex. So I know that Van Halen style of pursuing sex is not actually, it's not as much rewarding as you might think it is.
Well, have you ever had sex with somebody and halfway through it you just thought, this sucks, and just get up and leave? Oh, fuck it.
No, I've been polite and stuck through it. Very rarely. I mean, very rarely does that ever happen where I realize, you know what, we don't have chemistry. This isn't that great. But no, if you do it, you're going to be polite to the person. You're not going to just like up and leave. That would be an awful thing to do.
Go out through the window with you know, massive throbbing heart on, and you know, knock over, you know, a bird's nest or something with your penis.
That's a weird image. Okay.
Yeah, I'm all about, you know. So, so now, are you in a place that, you're happy, like you're like, you know what, I do these talks, I try to educate people. Are you in a good, like, do you feel good?
Yeah, actually, yeah. The structure of my life now is so much more liberated and calming and less stressful. There's just aspects of my life that I'm more content with now. Living by myself, being my own person, being my own boss. These are all good things. And then having the freedom to be honest about my relationships and my desires and things like that, not have to conceal them, not have to pretend they don't exist, not have to lie to anyone. Like, this is the way to live. I'm quite happy with it. And I recommend it every chance I get, but it's not easy to get to this place where I'm at, especially if you're in a monogamous relationship currently. But even if you're not, like, even if you're deciding how to decide your future relationship models, it takes time to like build a good non-monogamous life. Like you can't just immediately jump into it and immediately it's a bunch of orgies. So there's aspects just like coping with death or the other things we were talking about earlier, coping with the injustice in the world and things like that. You have to kind of like get right with yourself as a person in terms of how you interact with people in relationships and what kind of a person you are, what kind of partner you are to the people that you have relationships with. You have to actually like really seriously consider that and improve yourself as a person, make yourself into a better partner, more, listen more, improve yourself more and things like that. To be good at poly and consequently develop a lot of good relationships and actually have a good non-monogamous lifestyle. And but it's the same thing in all the other things that religion keeps you from doing. That it sort of stunts your personal growth if you say, well, you can only be monogamous, everything else is sin, or you're going to live forever, don't worry about the dying thing. No, don't worry about the injustice in the world, God's going to all set it right. All of these things that we would be better people if we actually confronted them and found a way to cope with them and make ourselves more useful to the world in terms of how we deal with these things. We're blocked from going there by these religious ideas. And I think even secular people are still picking up a lot of the assumptions of our religious culture and continue with these same negative assumptions about what you're supposed to do in life that are actually contrary to human happiness. And so this is I see polyamory as part of a lot of other things that secularism is doing ultimately to sort of break down these harmful religious assumptions infecting society so that we can finally get past them and actually improve ourselves as a society and as individuals.
But that works for you, right? Like everyone's different. Like that's
I mean, and especially now, like, but over time, of course, it's just like anything else, like atheism in general. As more and more people get freed from these assumptions, more and more people are going to like it and enjoy it and pursue it. So I think monogamy will decline over time. I think that's it's just difficult for individuals to get out of it now because their lives are so complex and there's no easy way to transform your life once you're stuck in that model. But as generations come and as more and more people move away from monogamy, more and more people will be freed from those constraints and can actually explore the relationship models that they want rather than the relationship models their culture tells them they're supposed to want. And I think over time, we're going to see more and more non-monogamy, public ethical non-monogamy as a thing. I think it's lagging behind the acceptance of atheism and homosexuality in terms of broadness of its acceptance, but that acceptance is going to grow. And consequently, more and more people are going to realize they don't have to be monogamous, and they're going to choose not to be monogamous. And I think ultimately, in the long run, probably 50 to 100 years, that's going to become more and more the norm.
Right. And like I've never seen pretty much all my friends that I've grown up with and people that I've met. I've seen 90% of them have gotten divorced.
Well, this is another thing, right? Is everyone's already non-monogamous. They're just either not honest about it or they're doing it in serial. Yeah. Exactly. Monogamy is not really an effective model of relationships. And there's not really any evidence that it's natural to humans either. It's another one of these sort of forced models that we're creating for ourselves that might be contrary to happiness. It might work for some people. I can't speak for everyone, right? But there is a tendency also for people to rationalize the situation that they're in. And so they consequently might not be able to see that they would be happier in a different model. And that was me for 17 years, frankly. And in hindsight, I realized that I wasn't a fully happy person. I wasn't, I felt very, there were aspects of my life that were not satisfying and unfulfilled. And for all that time, for all the 17 years, but I just justified that as, well, you're just supposed to make it work. That's just what relationships are like. Now on the other side of it, I realize that's not how relationships have to be, and that there is an alternative. But when I was in it, I was in that monogamy culture mindset. It was like, well, no, you love your wife. This is supposed to how you make things work. Relationships are always difficult and so on. And that's just not necessarily true. There are other ways you can organize the way you interact and build your relationships.
Right. All right. Okay, no, that's very. You could sell fucking ice cubes to an Eskimo. I mean, that's really great.
Well, there's good books on this for people who want to look into it. Sort of the Bible of polyamory is the book More Than Two. But there's other shorter books out there on polyamory. You can just go look at what are the top sellers on Amazon. The Ethical Slut is people criticize it as being kind of obsolete now, but that's actually a common reference that people start with. But there are several others. More, like I said, More Than Two is the sort of Bible. It's as thick as a Bible too, because it covers everything for people who are interested in that. But there are a variety of different books about non-monogamy that are worth exploring for people who might want to see what is this really like. What are people who've done this? What do they say it's like, and how do they compare their two lives when they were monogamous versus when they weren't? I think it's useful for people to at least be exposed to that in the same way that even if you're straight, it's very helpful to understand more about gay people and gay culture. Even though and now it's possible maybe that someone is actually gay and closeted, and that will actually help them escape that. But even if you just are actually straight, but it helps to understand better these other people in their lives. I think it's helpful for monogamous people to understand polyamorous people in their lives better as well, so that we can actually have a society where we can all get along as we're transitioning to a different way of doing things socially.
Because I've seen and I've heard I've heard that people have tried to do the whole swinger thing, I guess. I don't know, right? It was a swinger kind of thing.
Yeah, it's different. We don't really have a fixed capable vocabulary yet, but I know exactly what you mean. And part of the problem, of course, is that if you don't know what you're doing or you don't do it right, or also if you're just not compatible with your partner, like that. This is one thing, is like just opening a relationship is not necessarily going to solve your relationship problems. If you have relationship problems, they might indicate that you really shouldn't be together. Opening up isn't going to solve that. But then sometimes it does. So it depends on what your particular circumstances are. It depends on cases. So everyone's particular situation is different. You can't predict from going in what's going to happen. But if you're going to do that, if you're going to try a non-monogamous relationship in any form, you really need to understand how to do it ethically and informedly in terms of the psychology of it. And there are books now that can help people get prepared and handle that correctly, rather than go into it in the wrong way that could be destructive or harmful.
Yeah, these people, they tried it and they just destroyed their their marriage, because the guy can never look at his wife the same way, and the wife could never look at their husband again. And
yeah, so that sounds to me like a relationship that probably shouldn't have been together in the first place. But anyway, it's hard to diagnose without further data. But yeah, and you do have to be aware that opening a relationship may end your relationship, but it's going to result, if that's the thing you want to do, it's going to result in you building non-monogamous relationships that actually work. And this is part of the painfulness and difficulty of the transition from a monogamy culture to a non-monogamy culture, is that people have been really invested in, and even like have it beaten into them, that you have to think in a certain monogamous way. And it can be really hard to get out of that. And you might not be able to psychologically get out of that. It might require the next generation to never have been beaten into that mindset to actually escape it, essentially. But I think there are a lot of people who do escape it. I know tons of people who've done so, and successfully and happily. But there, you're not going to know from the start how things are going to end. You have to be open to the possibility that you're going to end up with a completely different relationship model with completely different people in 10 years, if that's the direction you're going to go. And so you do have to make that decision in terms of, are you going to deal with the suffering and the misery or the unfulfillment that you have in your monogamy, or are you going to try and break out of monogamy? And if you're going to do that, how can you do that ethically? And are you prepared for all the contingencies? What could happen in terms of how your life changes as a result?
And if you're happily married, just
if it's working and you're fulfilled, and I think, and yeah, if you're absolutely certain that nothing's going to go wrong in that regard, you might as well stick with it. That's true. I just think that that's a model that's going away. I think that's not going to exist as commonly in 50 to 100 years.
Well, it works for me and my wife. We both love each other, so it kind of works for us. We have kids. I love, being with my wife. You know what I mean? So
yeah, for sure.
It works. It works for me. Me picturing myself with somebody else. I just, everybody has fantasies, but you just, guys are guys. But I just couldn't. I like the model. My model, the old-fashioned one. That's the one that works for me. And if you find the right person, that you're very lucky in this world. If everything else is shit, and you find somebody that believes in you and loves you, then that's all you need, really. And that's for me, lucky, not in that sense, but yeah, the for you, you weren't happy or whatever, you said, fuck it, I'm gonna go out and fuck other people. So, and that's the way, you came up with that.
You can have multiple love relationships too. It's not just sexual openness, which can be a part of it, is being open to sexual experiences with lots of people. But being free of these constraints also means that you are not, there's no oppression on your emotions either. You can actually be in love with multiple women, and those women could be in love with multiple men, and it's all fine. We actually get along with it and like that, and it actually works. And I think freeing people sexually is part of it, but also freeing people emotionally, I think that is a key part of it too. And I think in the long run, that's where things are going to go. And especially since then, breakups are different when you have multiple partners, because you've always got a love relationship that you've got left over that you can fall back on and, lean on. You've got a shoulder to lean on all the time, basically, when you've got that situation.
Right.
And so relationships can be more fluid, and they can be defined in more complex ways. There's not one single relationship model. You might have different relationship models with different people at the same time, and can live multiple lives at the same time and do it honestly and openly. It's not like something that you have to conceal or hide or deny or anything like that. And so I see that as the future. And I understand that there's people who are in the situation they're in. It might be preferable for them to stick with what they've got. It depends. Like, I can't really predict in terms of where you'll be in 10 years, for instance. But I do think that that's a model that it doesn't work for most people. Like you said, like 90% of the people are divorced. So I think we do need to get away from that model as a society, or at least away from pushing that model on people and expecting them to have to adhere to it.
But Richard, what I see is that, like, they get divorced and they're dating or whatever, and it's like a fucking, I'm same age, and I'm like, I don't know if they were, midlife crisis or whatever the hell, but they're still miserable. Like, they're still dating and fucking all these other people, and they're still not happy. And, some of them wish that they could still have their old partner, because now their partner has moved on to somebody else. And I was like,
well, that's the thing with non-monogamy, though, is that you can have both. You can actually be with your old partner and explore other relationships. And the thing that's like why I recommend the books is because these books do teach relationship skills that help you figure out how, in fact, to not be miserable doing this continuing to try and replicate this monogamy model over and over again. You can actually find a great deal of peace and happiness and fulfillment having multiple relationships simultaneously, honestly, and openly. But you do have to do it informedly and ethically. This is the thing, is you can't just keep trying to replicate this sort of failed model of a relationship. You've got to sort of grow as a person and think about what relationships even mean to you. Like, what are you getting out of them, and how do you get those things out of them honestly? And a lot of that deals with like communication, how you choose your partners, lots of other factors in that. So yeah, there are ways to solve these problems, but they do involve sort of confronting the need to really take seriously these questions about what is it that you even get out of relationships? What are the things that you really need in life? What are the things that you need to be fulfilled? And how do you achieve those things in an ethical and honest way? Right. And when you work that out, you find yourself in a very different place than everyone else you're talking about. And that's the kind of thing that I think is important for people, is to look at these relationship skills as skills you need to develop, and yourself as a person who needs to be more developed, and how you, in what kind of value as a partner you are. Like, how do you interact with your other partners? There's many aspects to this. And right. Like I said, these books do cover it, different aspects of this. And of course, there are also websites, web pages that have a lot about it as well.
Yeah.
If you want to explore that.
Like I did a show, and I've done it twice, where it was a swingers group, and they were like, they were all naked, and they wanted me to be naked. And I was like, fuck that. I mean,
you were in studio with them? Is that?
No, they rented a space.
Okay.
So there was a bar. They closed off the bar, and
that's kind of weird. Okay.
It was really weird, because the manager was like, they want to know, they think you're funny, and they want to know if you could be naked. And I'm like, are you fucking out of your mind?
Yeah, that's.
I can sit there with I need to kind of look like I have, like when I'm naked right now, I want, you know, the guy, you know, everybody thinks the guy's penis is fucking normal, you know, size. And I'm like, I don't want to be sitting there with my uncircumcised penis, not, you know, at a good size, you know what I mean? Like I would want it like elastic, make it hard.
Well, I think if you're interviewing them, like, you should be attired the way you want to be. Like that would be.
I said, I'm not going to do it naked or whatever, but you know, it was just like they don't mind, and I'm like, well, I do, you know.
Yeah. Well, exactly. That's how people should respect other people's preferences in that regard. Yeah.
So it was really. Anyways, you know, I get it, what you're saying, but for me, I think that it worked for you, and it's going to work for other people. But you know that, you know, for some people, I think they just love being married to this. You know, believe it or not, I think they love if they find the right person. I don't think that they want. And I've seen people. You know, I say 90% of the people I met. Well, you know, the 10% that I do meet, they love the shit out of each other. And I love that, you know, that to me gives me joy if I see somebody.
Yeah, for sure. And you can also have that in non-monogamy as well. So it's not a thing you have to give up. That's the key lesson there. But yeah, it's everyone's got to make these decisions for themselves, but they should do it informedly. So like, they should get informed about these things and read up on the options and think about them, and even like be willing and able to, hopefully they're willing and able to explore them, like at least talk about them with their partners. Right. And that's the future I want to advocate for.
Yeah. Well, I asked my wife for a divorce, but she said, okay, but I have to be home by 8:30. So that that didn't work out too well. So, no, I didn't ask for a divorce.
I know.
It's a shit joke that I'm glad that you laughed 5 seconds later.
Yeah, I had to like contemplate, like, what. Okay, I was trying to figure that one out, but yeah.
I mean, this day and age, you notice. I don't want to take up any more of your time, but this day and age, you notice that people just don't. It's so hard to like. It's like you offend everybody now these days.
Oh yeah, that's true.
It's just scary. You know, I mean, I can't even call my buddy a fag anymore. You know, I mean, we grew up calling each other fags, and now it's like people are like, you can't say that, and I'm like, I've been saying it for fucking years. I mean, we don't mean that. I don't mean that he sucks my dick. I mean,
well, I think the thing that's negative about that is the implication that there's something wrong. That's actually to use that as an insult is basically saying that it is an insult to be gay. Right.
No,
That's
it's never meant to be an insult. It's like, hey, you know, hey, you fag, put that away. You know, it's kind of like, it's not, you know,
yeah,
you grow up with people. They know that you're, you know, I've known these people for 40 years. It's not like I just met you. Hey, fag, you know.
Yeah, no, but it's the thing is that perpetuates the image of that as kind of a dig on someone, and that's actually that creates a negative atmosphere for gay people, basically. So that's why that actually is a sort of
I don't
practice that should fall into disuse. I don't think we should.
Yeah,
Richard, it doesn't make you evil, but it is something that we don't want to keep perpetuating.
But I don't say it in you know, in a crowded room, or it's just
well, okay, so right. So that's another example of being aware of that, of the impact.
Yeah, like we just, you know, if we're in the car or whatever, it's just we, you know, we don't say it in front of somebody we don't know, you know. And I mean, have you ever been in a back room full of fucking comics? The shit that they say.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's just if you think calling your buddy a fag is horrible, you got to hear how, you know, fucking. I think Lucifer, if he was for real, would fucking die of a heart attack if he heard the shit that was going on. I don't know. I just find it that, you know, the world is not. I know everything changes, but it's just not.
Yeah, it's gonna change, and we should work for that change. We don't always ourselves necessarily aren't going to be perfect agents of that change.
What do you think of? I just saw a video on, just real quick. I just saw a video on Twitter where they ripped down a statue of Silent Sam. I guess he was a Confederate. I'm Canadian, so I don't.
Oh, I don't know. I know about the tearing down of Confederate statues. I don't know this particular one.
So yeah, they tear it down, and to me, I just think you're destroying your history, right? I mean, you're even though that person was a bad person, and I just commented on it saying, you know what, you should at least leave it there, because people will ask about who this person was, and you know, I mean, it's a great, you know, for history. It doesn't condone.
Well, if you want to preserve it for history, you put it in a museum.
Yeah, you could do that.
And some people have done that actually with some of those statues. Yeah, no, the reason they get torn down is because they're on public ground. So they're basically the person, that figure is being honored as a representative of the state. Is essentially that's the symbolism that has to be removed. So that does have to be removed from state land. So we don't have this situation where you have basically like sitting in front of a courthouse, for example, this famous slave owner that we're honoring because he actually fought a civil war in favor of slavery. It would be like basically having a statue of Hitler in front of you know, the German parliament. Obviously they can't have that. If you're going to keep the statue of Hitler at all, you're going to put it in a museum somewhere and put it in context and not have it in a place of honor. Because you no longer want that person representing your state or your values.
Right. So yeah, well, to me it was like, just put it, like, don't destroy it. Put it, you know, in a museum or whatever. But teach people this is what this is what the history was. You can have a picture of where it was and why it was moved. You could do a whole thing about it.
Sure. Yeah. Why not?
Yeah, I just thought, you know, you're just destroying history, and be it good or bad, all history is history was bad. I mean, Canada, there was.
Yeah, but sometimes it makes sense to destroy symbols of things, like, you know, when the Nazi or when the Americans finally seized Berlin. Of course, one of the first things they did was dynamite the Nazi symbol.
Of course, yeah.
So you know, it's like sometimes that makes sense. You don't necessarily But
you don't want a giant Nazi symbol sitting there going, hey, you know.
Well, yeah, and that's what's going on with the Confederate statues, and certainly it makes sense to move them to museums. And if there are people who are in favor of keeping the statue, they can fund the preservation of the statue in a museum capacity. So that's one of those cases where people should put their money where their mouth is if they actually believe in preserving this stuff. The thing that they can't handle sometimes is that we are now disassociating our government with those people. And those are the committed racists and defenders of the old ways of doing things who get offended by the fact that we are actually saying now we are divorcing our state support and honor for this person. And that of course, isn't going to be solved by moving it to a museum. People just need to get over that and realize that their values and their thinking are now a thing of the past and are no longer going to be endorsed by the state. And so that's a lot of what is going on is that conversation now.
Right. Okay. Yeah, no, I saw that and I just thought, yeah, well, you know, you're destroying something that it's history. Just, you know, if you don't like it, all right, put it in a museum. But you know what? Oh, you should always ask questions. Like even with oh
yeah, you don't want to erase stuff, pretend it didn't happen or didn't exist.
That's my thing. Don't erase.
The people who are, but this stuff is in our textbooks and we actually are teaching it in school, but there are people who want to remove it from the textbooks, and the people who want to remove it are not the ones who are against it. They're the ones who want to pretend it didn't happen. Right? It's usually the racists and the people who want to support the racist history or deny that history exists, or make up excuses for it. Those are the people who want to erase it from history. It's not the people who are now saying, you know, actually, we no longer support these values. Those people actually want it in the textbooks. They want it. They want everyone to be educated about it.
Right.
So that's the divide that's going on.
All right. Just so last question, and because I know.
Yeah, we got to wrap up, but yeah.
So have you ever seen it this bad with Trump? And I watched how.
No, I have not. This is
never seen it.
Just you know, when I thought Iran-Contra was the greatest act of treason in presidential history, and then you have this massive fiasco of Donald Trump. It's unfathomable. I keep telling people it's like, I feel like we're in an alternative timeline. Like some time traveler went back and ran over the wrong kid, and this is not supposed to have happened, and like everything's gone wrong because the course of history has been interrupted somehow. And we're in this bizarre world where we've got, female Russian spies using sex to gain influence and seducing the NRA with fashion model photos. I mean, of her holding guns.
Bless you.
It's like something out of a movie.
Yeah.
If someone were to write this movie, people would go, "Oh, that's ridiculous. That would never happen."
Didn't it?
God damn.
Didn't it freak you out that when he won? Hey, look, I love that, the old accent.
Yeah,
like a 7-year-old Jewish man there. Yeah, there you go. You should blow in the wind. And then
I think my allergies have hit me now.
Oh, okay. So yeah, when he won, it took me about a week because I just knew him from TV, right? So I didn't believe it.
Right.
And I think people were still. I just think people were still kind of saying,
"How the hell did that happen?" Yeah.
Yes, how did that happen? So, crazy time. And real quick, last question: if you had a time machine, where would you go? You could still come back. Where would you go? Why? And remember, you could still come back. You weren't stuck there. So where would you go? I know you talk about Jesus and saying there was no Jesus.
I mean, if I could go to multiple places, that'd be one to go to, right? Is to go check out how did Christianity how did it actually begin? That would be one thing to check out. But that isn't really the top of my list. I mean, frankly, if I had a time machine, I would go super far in the future and get all the benefits of advanced technologies and immortality and all of that. But assuming I already had all of that, the most interesting time, I think, to attempt, for example, to change the course of human history would be to go back to when Vespasian takes over after Nero. So this is like 65 AD, and go back and try to convince them to adopt a variety of reforms that could actually sort of create the American Revolution, but make the Roman Empire do it, and see how the future. See if we can create a stable government that doesn't collapse, and a democratic government that doesn't become overly tyrannical. And then how would that change? Would that advance and accelerate the development of the future so that we don't have the Middle Ages, we don't have the Dark Ages, we don't have the 2,000 years of horrible shit that have gone on from not figuring our shit out sooner? Because I think that's the one moment in history where there was the most chance of making that influence and change. Like, I think you could persuade someone like Vespasian to implement these reforms, especially if you offer certain technologies that would be attractive as bargaining chips, essentially, to implement these things. So I would want to do that, but I want to make sure that I have some sort of futuristic immune system that makes me immune to all the germs of that time and makes everyone of that time immune to all my germs. Because the reality is, if a time traveler went back to the 1st century AD, he would probably wipe out 95% of the population by introducing new microbes that they're not immune to. And then that time traveler would probably die from microbes that he doesn't have antibodies for. So if you're going to do that, you really need to think about the immunology problem.
You come back and there's Hitler doing like a fucking tap dance, just and it's just like, it's all because of that right there. While you were talking about Vespasian, you went and blew your nose all over him. So,
yeah, no, and then Trump becomes president, and that
yeah. All right, so I want to thank you. Oh, and real quick, anything you want to plug? Anything you're working on?
Yeah, sure. People who want to learn more about me and things I've written on all subjects, my blog is the place to go. So that's richardcarrier.info. It's .info. There you can follow me on Facebook through there, Twitter through there. You can find, I teach courses every month at Partners for Secular Activism. You can find my classes there. If you go down to the drop-down menu for categories, classes, and then you can see what the latest one is or the next one is going to be. So I do that every month. So I teach courses in ancient history and in philosophy, fairly affordable. So it's worth doing if that's the thing that you're interested in, interacting and learning more stuff about those subjects. And I've got a variety of books. So you can find all my books are available through my website. And I have an app that I'm developing called the Crestus app. That is basically, it's going to eventually have all the arguments for and against the historicity of Jesus. It's still in a skeletal form. We're building it out now. But you can get a look at it. And it has a Bayesian calculator in it, so you can actually do some Bayesian equations without having to know any math and stuff like that. So those are the main things that are going on right now. And all of that stuff you can find through down the margin, the right-hand margin of my website, which is richardcarrier.info, richardcarrier.info.
Well, I'll put up the link, okay? And then that way people could just click on the link and they will go straight to the site. And I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. That was very kind of you. It means a lot. And I am a fan of your work. You know that. So thank you, Dr. Richard Carrier. He's like, call me Richard, but if you got the doctor, I would be like, you call me. So, thank you so much, Dr. Richard Carrier, for your time, and I hope this is a different interview than what you're used to. I wanted to ask you 1,000,001 other questions, but just, time.
Yeah, we don't have the time, but yeah,
it doesn't work. So, guys, click on the Wrecking Crew podcast. If you have any questions, please give me some questions, because I will not reply, or if I do, I'll call you a fag. So thank you so much, and have a great day, Richard, Dr. Richard Carrier, and everybody out in the universe, be good, okay? That's all. All right, I'm Vito D'Amcio. Ciao.